Vitamin A is think about the last time you had meat on your plate. Chicken, beef, pork, maybe salmon. Now try something odd. Try to remember the last time you ate a wolf, or a lion, or a hawk. You can't because you never have. Nobody has. Not in your country, not in any country, not in any era of recorded history. Humans have eaten almost everything imaginable. Grubs, organ meat, fermented shark, blood sausage, food so far gone it should have killed us. But there's one category we've left alone across every continent and every century. The meat of animals that hunt other animals for a living. That's strange when you sit with it. It feels like common sense, but common sense usually has a reason hiding underneath it. Most people would guess the reason is simple. Predators are hard to catch, dangerous to fight, not worth the risk. That guess isn't wrong exactly. It's just incomplete. The bigger reason isn't about the hunt at all. It's about what's sitting inside the animal by the time you'd get around to eating it. There's a word for it. Biomagnification. Once you understand how it works, you'll never think about a food chain or your own place in one the same way again. And by the end of this, you'll hear about a warning that killed explorers who thought they knew better, and an instinct your own ancestors carried without ever needing a word for it. Start small. A minnow in a lake picks up a trace of some pollutant from the water. Barely anything. A rounding error. That minnow gets eaten by a perch. The trace doesn't wash out or break down. It moves into the perch and stays there. The perch gets eaten by a pike. The trace moves again, and this time it's not alone. It's stacked on top of every other trace the pike picked up from every other fish it has ever eaten. Nothing along this chain resets to zero. Every meal adds a little more, and none of it leaves. So, by the time you reach the animal at the very top, the one nothing else hunts, you're not looking at a fish that ate some pollution. You're looking at a living ledger of everything every animal beneath it has ever absorbed, compressed into one body. Scientists have a clean name for this stacking effect: trophic magnification. Climb one level up the food chain, and concentration climbs with it. Not gently, but multiplicatively. An apex predator isn't just an animal, it's closer to an archive, storing a lifetime of everything its prey ever touched. And a human who eats that predator isn't eating a meal, they're eating the concentrated total of an entire ecosystem's worth of exposure, distilled into a single sitting. That's unsettling on its own, but it's not even the sharpest edge of the danger, because some of what accumulates isn't pollution that leaked in by accident. It's something the predator's own biology packs away on purpose. Picture the Arctic, centuries before satellite phones or emergency airlifts. A European expedition is stranded, supplies gone, temperatures unforgiving. Someone manages to kill a polar bear. To the crew, that's salvation, meat enough to survive the winter. But the local hunters who know this land say one thing clearly: not the liver, never the liver, not even if you're starving. It's a rule passed down for generations. No exceptions, no explanation offered beyond don't. To outsiders, that sounds like folklore, old superstition dressed up as wisdom. Some explorers listened, others didn't. In 1597, a Dutch crew stranded on a frozen island, cooked and ate polar bear liver. Within hours, they were violently, terrifyingly ill, vomiting, splitting headaches, skin peeling. Days later, genuinely unsure if they'd survive the night. More than 2 centuries later, in 1853, an American Arctic explorer wrote dismissively about the old warning: ate bear cub liver anyway to prove a point, and was doubled over with nausea and vertigo not long after. And, in 1912, during one of the Antarctic expeditions, 2 men were forced to eat their sled dogs' livers after their food ran catastrophically short. Neither one walked away from that stretch of the journey unchanged. So, what was actually happening inside that organ? Vitamin A, an almost incomprehensible amount of it. Your own liver stores a modest reserve of vitamin A, enough to be useful, not enough to be dangerous. A polar bear's liver stores it by the millions of international units, because the bear eats seals, and seals eat fish, and fish absorb it from the algae at the very bottom of the chain. And every single step upward concentrates it further. By the time it reaches the bear's liver, one bite is enough to poison dozens of grown adults at once. It stops being a nutrient and becomes, quite literally, a toxin. Not the only passenger riding that elevator upward either. Some researchers point to heavy metals like cadmium and mercury climbing the exact same staircase, concentrating the exact same way, for the exact same structural reason. Different molecules, same mechanism. Nothing that goes in at the bottom of a food chain ever really leaves. It just keeps climbing and compounding. Arctic communities never ran a lab test to figure this out. They didn't have the language for biomagnification or retinol toxicity. What they had was centuries of paying close attention. Eat eat the liver of the animal at the top, and people get sick or people die. Enough times, enough generations, and the pattern hardens into something absolute. A taboo, passed down as instruction rather than explanation, because a rule is easier to hand down intact than a chemistry lesson is. And here's the detail that should genuinely stop you. This same warning shows up in cultures that never had any contact with each other. Different continents, different centuries, different languages entirely. And somehow, independently, the same conclusion: leave the top of the chain alone. That's not coincidence. That's the same lesson being learned the same hard way, over and over, by people who had no way of comparing notes. Set the poison aside for a moment. Even a predator's ordinary muscle tissue, the part with none of that concentrated toxin, tells its own story, and it's not one your body finds appetizing. A prey animal like a deer, a cow, or a rabbit lives a life built around stillness, grazing, resting, slow, steady digestion. Their muscle develops soft, marbled, forgiving, built for an animal that spends most of its life calm. A predator doesn't get that life. Its existence is organized around bursts of extreme effort. The sprint, the ambush, the fight, then long stretches of nothing, then gorging when a kill finally lands. Imagine living that, heart slamming, adrenaline flooding your system again and again, for years, never quite settling. That kind of chronic physiological stress doesn't just disappear once the chase ends. It gets written into the muscle itself. Dense, lean, tightly wound fiber that's harder to chew, harder to digest, and far less pleasant to eat than the soft fat of an animal that lived a quiet life. Think about what you actually crave at a dinner table. Not lean, gamey, stringy meat. Tenderness, fat, something that reads, on a purely biological level, as safe and easy calories. Prey animals evolved generation after generation into exactly that. Predators evolved into the opposite. They weren't shaped by evolution to be food. They were shaped to be the ones doing the hunting. There's a third layer to this, quieter than toxins and tougher meat, and in some ways more personal: disease. Ask yourself, which animals are biologically closest to you? Not cattle, not chickens, predators, specifically the ones that hunt other warm-blooded mammals, because you are a warm-blooded mammal too. That closeness isn't a comforting kinship, it's a liability, a pathogen that's adapted to survive inside a fellow mammal, a fellow meat-eater, has a far shorter evolutionary jump to make into a human body than a pathogen that spent its whole existence inside a plant-eating prey animal. Layer parasites on top of that. A predator doesn't just accumulate the toxins of everything it has ever eaten. It accumulates the parasites too, generations stacked on generation, climbing the food chain by the same mechanism as everything else. Every bite of predator meat isn't really one animal. It's the compressed risk of an entire chain of animals, handed to whoever eats last. Long before anyone understood a pathogen or a parasite in scientific terms, people figured this out empirically, the hard way. Those who avoided predator meat simply lived longer, more often, than those who didn't. Over enough generations, that outcome stopped being a personal choice anybody consciously debated. It calcified into instinct, into disgust, into taboo, into the kind of aversion nobody has to be taught, because it was inherited whole. You didn't learn to be repelled by the idea of eating a lion from a textbook. You inherited it from every ancestor who happened to skip that particular meal and lived to pass the preference on. So, here's the reframe. You probably assumed predators were off the menu because they were too dangerous to catch, too fast, too strong, too likely to fight back. That's part of it, sure, but it was never the main danger. The real danger was already sitting inside them, quietly, long before any hunt even began. Every fish that small fish once ate, every seal that bear once caught, every year of chronic stress chemistry burned permanently into tightening muscle. Every parasite passed silently upward, one host at a time, all of it concentrated, waiting, and handed in full to whoever finally eats it last. And that's where this turns back on you, because you are, in your own way, a predator too. You sit near the top of your own food chain, eating from many levels below you, every single day. So, somewhere out there, a scientist could ask the exact same question about you that Arctic hunters quietly answered about the polar bear centuries ago. What's been accumulating in your body, invisibly, from everything you've eaten across an entire lifetime? The polar bear never got a say in becoming a walking warning sign. It just happened to live at the top. You live at the top too. The difference is, you get to choose what climbs the chain and settles inside you. The bear never had that choice. You still do.